My questions are in three categories: Afghan security forces capabilities, drug trade, and then thirdly, Afghan governance. Dr. Kagan, the first one's to you. As much as we want the Afghan security forces to take the lead in the defense of Afghanistan, it's their country, and they have shown vast improvements, no doubt, we still have many national security interests at stake that are too important to leave to uncertainty. You've warned that enemy expansion in Afghanistan, including ISIL, will accelerate under our current strategy. You've also argued that we must reconsider our current force posture in Afghanistan, as well as our rules of engagement that several of you have pointed out. So I ask, why is our current mission limited to only counter-terror operations against al-Qaeda and not all insurgent groups, including ISIS? And how would you assess the Afghan security forces' current capability to counter the threats it faces from ISIS, other terror groups? What should our rules of engagement be?
The Afghan security forces were never built having in mind that they would have to operate under the conditions that they are now operating in, as David Sedney pointed out. First of all, the assumptions underlying their structure were that they would face a much more mild insurgency that had been beaten down significantly. That is not the case. And it was also assumed that the United States and the international coalition would continue to provide significant high-end enablers in their fight against the Taliban, as well as in their fight against al-Qaeda and other such organizations. So they are now engaged in a fight for which they were never designed and structured, which is one of the reasons why they are struggling so badly. It is important for us to recognize that their primary enemy is not al-Qaeda, and their primary enemy is not ISIS, nor will it be. Their primary enemy is the group that can destroy the Afghan state. And so in this sense, to the extent that we define our only interest in Afghanistan as going after terrorists, and we limit our support to the Afghan security forces to that, we will not succeed in eliminating terrorists, because we can't do that without a partner, and our partner will die because it's not those terrorists that are threatening it. So in my opinion, it is an enormous mistake that this administration has made consistently over the years to try to narrow the scope of our interests in Afghanistan exclusively to targeted attacks fundamentally on terrorist leaders, without recognizing the cataclysmic failure of that approach across the globe, but also without recognizing that it creates a high likelihood of what we are now seeing, which is that whatever gains we might make there will be washed out as insurgent groups that we are not allowing our troops to fight properly alongside the Afghans take over and destroy our partners.
Thank you so much, Dr. Kagan. I'd like to discuss our counter-narcotics operation in country. We know that much of the profits from the illicit drug trade in Afghanistan goes to fund terror activities in Afghanistan and worldwide. However, our DEA and INL presence has been dramatically decreased there. The Afghans aren't yet fully capable of leading this kind of large-scale mission, since these two are tied together, the drug trade and terror. Shouldn't we place a greater emphasis on ending the drug trade in Afghanistan? Is that possible, realistically? Do we go after the financing of other terror groups as part of our plan to counter and defeat them? We need to do so in Afghanistan as well. Why do we not? Is it because we don't think that that would be successful? To whoever would like to answer. Thank you, Dr. Sid.
Well, others can add as well, but counter-narcotics was an area that when we were doing our counterinsurgency efforts in Afghanistan from 2009, 10, and 11, and into 12, we did take some efforts there, and USAID and others have cooperated as well. What we've found by looking around the globe, however, is the only way you can effectively go after the narcotics industry is a holistic way. It's not just a security threat. It's not just the traffickers. You have to find ways to work with the farmers, give alternate crops, and you have to continue that. We did, for about 2 years, have some success in Helmand Province, where a crop substitution program, a voucher program, combined with very aggressive enforcement efforts and military action against traffickers, that was making progress. But then we pulled back from that. We don't have the resources right now to carry that out. So sadly, I would say, as a consequence of our decision to pull back across the board in Afghanistan, counter-narcotics, which I agree with you on the importance of, is an area where we are just not positioned to do really much at all that can be effective.
Dr. Wilder.
Yeah, if I could just add on that point, I have some good news and bad news. The good news is that cultivation area decreased this year by about 19% for opium poppy, and opium production actually reduced by nearly 48%. The bad news is it doesn't seem to be a result of counter-narcotic efforts, but more due to farmer decisions, bad harvest, crop issues. But I agree with David that I think the larger issue is ultimately, you do need a holistic approach, and it relates to broadly improving the security situation and then working with our government, the Afghan government, to try to improve governance and the rule of law. And I think that is, though, an area of where we can be more optimistic, because we do have a partner in the new government that I think does want to promote the rule of law and takes the issue of the poppy production seriously, in contrast to his predecessor.
And speaking of governance, as part of our assistance to Afghanistan, the U.S. provides at least half of that development aid directly through the Afghan budget. How can we take steps to ensure that we are mitigating all of the risk inherent in our direct assistance? And for sure, the new management is tackling the problem of corruption. How can we help Afghanistan to step it up more?
Well, I'll take a stab at it, but then if others also want to add, I'm actually very supportive of the idea of more on-budget assistance. The evidence actually shows that most corruption in Afghanistan was not the corruption from what went through the budget. That was actually a good control system. It was largely a lot of the money that was spent off budget. And now, again, with a more reform-oriented government in place, which is trying to take measures to crack down on corruption, I would be supportive of trying to give the new government the support it needs through more on-budget assistance. I do think, however, that the issue of performance is mixed. We have some ministers who are more reform-oriented and more effective than others, and the issue of improved government is critically important. I mean, if there's one lesson from the last 14 years in Afghanistan, it's that military gains on the battlefield are not sufficient. They really have to be matched by better governance. And I think that's where maybe with our assistance we need to have some more conditions attached of rewarding the better performing ministers and ministries and penalizing those that don't. So I do think that there is room for conditions, and I actually think President Ghani himself is supportive of this. And I think this is, I would actually laud the new development partnership agreement between the U.S. and Afghanistan, which actually targets $800 million, which is released in tranches based on performance measures being achieved by the Afghan government. So I think that kind of assistance, we're getting smarter at this, and I'm confident with the new government we'll have better achievements than we had in the past.